electorate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Our next guest is Melissa Osley. Did I get that right?
Osley.
Okay, welcome. Come on up, state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Osley, and I'm actually a part of that as well. That's my concern as well. I wasn't running for office, but as a voter, I'm certainly invested in researching candidates and issues, and so not having the pamphlet was a bit difficult to track down information about candidates and the issues. And so I would just echo that statement that yes, we would love to have that. That would be extremely helpful. So,
thank you. All right, our next guest is Tiffany Mitchell. Coming up, and state your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Tiffany Mitchell. I am a resident here in Astoria and of Clatsop County. I'm here representing a group called Indivisible North Coast Oregon and a specific project we have going called Vote the Future. One of the things that we identified as a really good project for this group to go after was the absence of a voter pamphlet. As my comrades here tonight have brought up already, there was not a voter pamphlet in the 2017 special elections, and as far as I know, there won't be one in November either. For this exact reason, I had heard also that the reason for this was because of low voter participation, that this was a long-standing decision that the commission had made. And in my personal opinion, one of the best ways to decrease voter turnout is to not inform your electorate. Even if that information is made available online, unfortunately, unless you're motivated to go find it, you're not going to. And in my experience, people who are just the casual voters don't seek out that information on their own. If it doesn't come in the mail, if they're not actually directed to where they need to go, they don't go find it themselves. I personally believe that all elections should be considered equal. All elections matter. The key to having an informed electorate is to give them the information. And even if you feel that perhaps some positions don't warrant the same attention as others on an election, because say it's an unopposed race, a lot of times elections have all sorts of measures on there that if people aren't informed about them either, we have people voting or not voting simply because they don't know. So I'm here to ask specifically that in January that this actually be something that you consider on your agenda and that we have a spot on the agenda for you to continue to talk about this issue, especially as you go into budget discussions for the 2019 and onward for that election. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next guest is Pamela Matson McDonald. Come on up, state your name and address for the record, please. Thank you.
May I stand?
Absolutely.
I'm Pamela Matson McDonald. I reside in Astoria at 1561 Exchange Street. This is also about the voters' pamphlets. It's a known fact that when people don't know about the candidates and ballot measures in election, fewer people vote. And I want you, my Clatsop County Commissioners, to resume publishing a voters pamphlet in off-year elections like the one that was published in this May 2017. It's about the right to vote, to be informed, so that we, the people, can make good decisions about our future. So please make publishing a regular voters pamphlet on an agenda item in the upcoming meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next guest is Carolyn Eady. Carolyn, come on up, state your name and address for the record.
Carolyn Eady, Astoria resident. I'm here tonight to just introduce the topic because it's complex and will require more consideration. But it's related to forestry, first as it relates to climate change, and the second as it's relating to how we're poisoning many areas of the state through certain commercial practices. I would like to give you two examples of where we have the Forest Practice Act, which governs commercial, private forests. And then we have the Forest Management Plan, which governs the state forests. And in both cases, these plans are not noted for being extremely strong, but even with that, they are not being followed up or monitored. We have a very lax system. Illustration. The Department of Forestry recently issued a paper called The Way Forward that somebody got through the Freedom of Information Act. The Board of Forestry didn't even know about it, in which they outlined various ways to increase revenue by various methods. And they had 6 pages of how to get around the Forest Management Plan. No mention in that whole document of anything about conservation. The second illustration, and I really want to stress this, it's just a small segment of the forest industry, not all of it. Most of them are very responsible, but unfortunately, the ones who are in it for a return on investment, I call them the Wall Street loggers, they probably don't like that name, but they want to get about a 5% return. And as a result, they have very harsh methods. They have big, heavy equipment that can go flat or up hills. They sort of mow the trees down, they compact the soil, plus they spray, sometimes more than once, 2, 3, 4 times a year. And it's that spray. I was at a meeting in Hebo. People are living with this. They're being poisoned. They're poisoning the water and the spraying that goes over. I just felt really, there was a physician who talked about the damage to children she's seen in her practice now. Anomalies, sexual anomalies, structural anomalies. It's happening now. I would encourage any of you to drive down the coastline from Astoria to Ashland, and you'll be shocked.
I'll give you one more minute, okay?
Thank you, and I will wrap it up. So, on October 6th, I sent a letter, an open letter to the Board of Forestry in which I expressed my really grave concerns about what was happening regarding the climate change aspect. And I will leave a copy with your secretary of that. The second thing is I have one other attachment. It's called Recommendations from Beyond Toxics, and it's a good starting point. Their recommendations for beginning that discussion. I would urge you to read this material, consider it, and maybe talk about it in some open session in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes business from the public. Looking for a motion to approve the amended consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion to second to approve the amended consent calendar. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Clerk, are we ready? Tonight, we're going to have some hearings, and we're going to basically, we're going to have a joint hearing. There'll be 2 pieces. There'll be the introduction, and then there'll be 2 individual hearings, all kind of in an umbrella of a joint hearing. Tonight's hearings are joint meetings of the County Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. Under the county zoning ordinance, The application first requires a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the board, and then a final decision by the board. I will open the hearing, then turn over the gavel to the Planning Commission Chair, Francis, to preside over the testimony. After everyone has testified and the record is closed, the Planning Commission will deliberate and make a recommendation to the board. The board will not make a final decision tonight, but may conduct a first reading of the ordinance and deliberate. The board will reconvene on November 8th to make a final decision. Our first hearing tonight is an open public hearing on 17-04 Cannon Beach. I will now open the public hearing. This is a public hearing on ordinance 17-04, a proposed expansion of the Cannon Beach urban growth boundary. If approved, the ordinance will bring the subject property inside the city's urban growth boundary. The city has already approved the expansion. May I ask staff for a first reading by title only? I was going to do that right after you read the staff, but
Point of order, the planning commission would like to entertain a 3-minute recess for us to convene after the title is read.
yes, sir.
Thank you.
So at the point of order of Chair Francis, may I have the first reading, please? By title only.
Ordinance 17-04, adopting amendments regarding the urban growth boundary for the city of Cannon Beach.
We're gonna take a 5-minute, we're gonna.
He wants 3 minutes.
We're gonna take a 3-minute break, and then we're gonna reconvene the meeting.
So they're going to have a meeting, and we just sit here, and then they decide.
They're gonna give their recommendation.
So it'll be an agenda item in the future.
Yes.
Okay.
We're just kind of.
13 days from now.
Because we are allowed to deliberate on the condition, we can deliberate at the moment. We're going to come to any decision. So if you have questions for the planning commission, you'll have an opportunity.
And the reason we have the planning commission is the way your code's set up for amendments, you're supposed to have a hearing by the planning commission. Well, we'll just follow the planning commission, have them run the testimony, but if you have, just, catch the chair's attention and ask questions, your chance to ask questions.
Did those questions? So those
You would normally do it.
I knew this is new territory.
So,
Public hearings are kind of, I agree with them at the LNG and believe
It's just crazy procedure.
what you want to do is get as much information as you want. Issue that you have, hold off on that advice because you'll be able to ferret that out with situations.
Yeah, we'll open the report, then hear from the audience, and then we'll wrap back up with staff. So if you have those little questions, it wraps up after that. But if you have questions, jump on it.
one of the witness?
My experience is I don't really like very independent. I cannot interfere in the process. I like to the recommendation, maybe we can talk about it a little. Or parts of it, right, that are going to be it is for sure.
Legal standard was right back. Allows you this just shows that small. They're going to be a lot easier to see.
So they're going to have this on the recommendation, and then they'll, the one, they're going to do it.
falling around there. I got my let them give us their recommendations.
Okay, all right, now I understand. Oh, boy.
Oh, I've tried to.
My opinion, deliberate if we want to after the hearing, but my opinion. Yes, okay, good. I was just trying, I made that assumption because your experience.
It just means it's suddenly gotten very cold in here. Oh, that's what I just layer up. Got long johns.
Yeah.
So do we normally bring food or something?
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Popping up.
I know. All the fun is there.
But that did some
This is on.
kidding. Mother? She's in Michigan. Oh, Gladwin. Gladwin is? You know where, Basin, Saginaw, Midland. We're 30 miles, yeah. We're actually in 27.
Good.
So
Okay,
Houghton Lake is on 75. That's a Walmart.
Sure, you know, my parents, I'm from Lansing.
Oh, you're from Lansing?
Yeah. Which is halfway between Grand Rapids. Right.
I student taught in Lowell.
Oh, well, my.
I do think about it.
RJ Marks wrote about something. I don't say it even. So glad, yeah, okay.
There's a lot of cabins. Pratt Lake, Secord Lake. I think we have more lakes than Oregon does, but Oregon maybe has more rivers or something.
No, no problem. Talk on the phone.
The air conditioning is open or something?
It's like way cold.
Teresa,
I think it's
warm
freezing.
us up a little. Can you?
So you want to turn down the heat? You want to turn down the cooler?
Yeah,
I got this.
because I'm, oh, yeah, okay. Happy to hear it. So Bruce Francis, I'm behind you. I just want you to know it feels odd to be up and above you and not down beside you. You know.
I need Julie to bring
He's
us
right
back
there.
to the session.
Go ahead, bring us back.
Oh, do I need to bring it back?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, you get.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm now reconvening the public hearing, and Chair Francis, you have the floor. Looks like you're going to need that tonight.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Francis. I'm the chair of the County Planning Commission. We've never done an exercise like this. I was appointed in 1995, so we're pretty lucky to be privy to a joint session of both the Commission and the Planning Commission. Anyway, I'll take the roll call, please.
Commissioner Farrar,
Here?
Commissioner Merrill,
Here?
Commissioner Presley. Here. Commissioner Patrick,
Present.
Commissioner Mangar,
Here.
Commissioner Ridgely, excused. Chair Francis.
I'm present.
Will
So,
Carpenter,
Here.
Heather Hampson. Here. Chris Green.
Here.
thank you. So, we have a new member, Jackie Presley, a new commissioner that was appointed. This is her very first meeting. I really respect her ability to come to a joint session, trial by fire. She's really jumped right in. It's very brave. I'm very pleased that she's been able to come on board. So I'm going to go over the conducting of the hearings. I will be running the hearings for Ordinance 17-04 and 17-05. We are now in 17-04. The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. We'll have a staff report. We'll have questions of staff from the Planning Commission or Board. Public testimony in the following order will be the applicant, any public agencies, testimony in support of the application, testimony opposing the application, any neutral testimony, rebuttal, if any, by the applicant. Then close the public testimony, and after the record is closed for testimony, no other testimony comments will be heard from anyone unless a member of the Planning Commission or the Board has a specific question. Comments by staff will then follow, and follow-up questions for staff, if any, from the Commission or Board. Discussion by the Planning Commission, motion and decision, and then discussion by the Board, and then continue to November 8th for the second reading and final decision. If you wish to speak, please sign in. I will recognise those people wishing to speak. Any questions should be addressed through me. Please state both your name and address for the record when you come to the podium. If you are appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom you represent. Please keep testimony concise and to the point. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes. The criteria that apply to the decision are listed in the staff report. These are the criteria the county must use to reach a decision. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards these criteria or other criteria that you believe apply to the decision. Please describe how your comments relate to the criteria. Again, a decision on this application must be based on these criteria. Despite the importance of other issues or concerns, the county must base its decision on whether the evidence shows the application complies with the criteria. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford the Planning Commission, Board of Commissioners, or the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the City Council to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Do any members of the Planning Commission or Board of Commissioners have any ex parte contacts, site visits, bias, or conflicts of interest to disclose? If so, please disclose. I have to say that the applicant in this case is a realtor and deals with real estate at a complex that I manage. However, I believe that my decisions will be impartial based upon the report from the staff report and any evidence presented this evening. Does anyone in the audience wish to challenge a member's impartiality? Hearing now, none. Staff, will you please present your report?
Yes, sir. The request before you is to amend the Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan to expand the City of Cannon Beach urban growth boundary to include approximately 2-acre parcel that is located at 82743 Elkwood Mountain Road in Cannon Beach. And this is the parcel that is indicated on the map on the screen and that's before the commissioners. The attachments in the staff report, I'd like to point out what they contain. Attachment A is the proposed UGB expansion area. B is a copy of the City of Cannon Beach ordinance record, which is quite complete. C is a copy of all the hearing notices, the mail notice posted and published notices, which are dealt with in the notice requirements we'll go into in a moment. In the Roman numeral sections of the staff report under the executive summary, it outlines the city's actions to adopt the expansion, and I'd like to emphasize that this has already occurred by the city. And note that moving the UGB line does not have the potential to result in any on-site or off-site impacts. The summary also details that the city zoning will be applied immediately following county adoption in November, so the county's action is limited to approve the expansion of the UGB. The second slide showing here is the property itself, a little close-up. Its present zoning in the county is RA2. The city zoning is noted right above it. It's open space recreational, directly abutting the parcel to the north, and there is some RL residential low density zoning off to the northeast, and the lands to the south are still in county zoning. Section 2, the notice requirements. This section describes the noticing requirements and that the county has complied with statute completely. And then Section 3, the staff analysis. You'll note that it states that most goals do not apply since the subject property is already developed and contains no adopted or significant resources. The remaining applicable goals are described and include findings for consistency of the expansion with the comprehensive plan. A prominent goal is 14, urbanization, and you may note that it contains a number of factors, which is kind of unusual for determining the consistency of the goals, but all the applicable factors are addressed in this section. The request is also subject to and consistent with the Urban Growth Management Agreement with the City of Cannon Beach. And in Section 4 contains a staff recommendation, which is to approve the expansion of the City of Cannon Beach urban growth boundary as proposed. That concludes the staff report. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Are there any questions of staff from commissioners first? Hearing none. Planning commissioners? Thank you. One question before you leave. Is there any additional correspondence beyond those items included in the staff report? We received everything?
No, sir, there is not.
Thank you.
Right. And I'd also like to point out the third slide, and this indicates the zoning that the city will apply to the parcel, very low density residential once the ordinance is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. The applicant may now present the proposal. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Egrain Brown, 82743 Elkwood Mountain Road, Cannon Beach. I wanted to thank you all for your time and consideration in approving this amendment to the urban growth boundary, and I hope you will agree with all the findings thus far. And again, thank you for your time. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer anything I can.
Any questions from the commission?
I actually had a question that was previous, I just thought of it. What is Cannon Beach's low density? What would that be?
I actually don't have that zoning.
Square footage of
I
lot
think that's
size?
a question that Mark will be able to answer, and you will be next up for
Okay.
an agency report.
Thank you.
Any planning commissioners have questions of the applicant, please?
I have a question. I don't know that the applicant's going to be able to answer it. I'm a little bit surprised that this is being handled through the expansion of our urban growth boundary. It's my feeling that that provision is meant for the purpose of expanding a city's boundary when they need a new type of land. There's insufficient land to develop. Apparently, in this case, there was some error made and a city service was provided to a parcel of land outside the city boundary. But I certainly don't want to see the city service disconnected from the property, but on the other hand, I have a fundamental problem with using an urban growth boundary adjustment to correct some error that was made a couple years ago by a city. So I don't know if you have some comments around that. I'm kind of baffled by this whole process. So any light you might shed on that would be of interest to me.
I don't know that I have the exact answers for that, but everything you said is accurate. And this was the simplest solution. We had gone before the city of Cannon Beach, and this is the recommendation from the city council and planning department of Cannon Beach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question for you. Could you just bring us up to speed on the history of how that happened and why?
Yeah.
What was the question?
I'm having trouble hearing.
Oh, I just wanted to bring us up to speed on how this took place and why it took place. Might give you a little better understanding.
So a brief history was, in the report, it actually says 2015, but it was around 2012. Our well went dry for a long period of time. We ended up getting approval from the city to put in a city water line. Our property does abut to city limits, and therefore our water meter is in city road right away, like all of them. We put in the water lines up to the house as per the municipal code and everything according to the city. And then in about 3 years later, we're notified that that had happened in error and our water service was going to be disconnected. And so over the course of a few years, we've been trying to come to a mutual agreement that is satisfactory for everyone involved and to keep our water. That's been my main goal.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Do I have anybody wish to speak as a public agency? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Good evening, Mark Barnes. I'm the planning director for the city of Cannon Beach. Our address is P.O. Box 368, Cannon Beach 97110. In answer to the question that came up, the RVL zone is a 1 acre minimum lot size zone. It's a little different than your RA2 zone in terms of the number of uses, but in terms of density, it's a 1 acre zone.
Thank you.
The facts surrounding this were explained by Ms. Brown, and they're in the staff report. I won't go into those in any more detail unless you have questions of me. The City Council adopted this ordinance in July. This is one of those things because it involves an adjustment of the urban growth boundary that requires the action of both the city and the county, hence that's why we're here tonight. I would ask you to accept the staff recommendation. I wanted to say one more thing. I agree with Chairman Francis that this is kind of a rare event, this joint hearing, and I really appreciate both commissions doing this. I know you're not doing it just for my benefit, but it certainly is a generous act. I know that it involves some logistical problems at your end, but it's certainly appreciated from our end. If you have any questions now, I'd be happy to try to answer them. I'll stick around if any come up later in the meeting.
Does any commissioner have a question of Mark? Does any planning commissioner have a question? Please.
Kind of the same question, but I'll just reframe it. I mean, there was, it gets back to the idea of using the urban growth boundary adjustment. What other approaches could the city have followed, and why wasn't it possible to give them some kind of an exception and just give them the utility, right, without changing the city's boundary?
Yeah, we actually looked at some alternatives. One was urging the Browns to try to develop a different water source. We also looked at whether we wanted to change our own rules regarding the service of water outside the city limits in UGB. And then the third option was what you see tonight, which would expand the city limits in UGB. The council decided they did not want to change our rules regarding delivery of water outside the city limits. Our Cannon Beach's rules are quite a bit different than the other cities in Clatsop County. The other cities in Clatsop County that provide water provide it pretty freely outside the city limits. Cannon Beach does not, with very few exceptions. There's no water service, no municipal water service outside the city limits. And the city council was not interested in changing that rule or waiving it in this case. Hence, this boundary adjustment was the other alternative that they chose.
Any other questions of Mr. Barnes?
Thank you.
None. Thank you very much for your testimony. Does anybody wish to speak in favour of the application? I usually get rushed. Does anybody wish to speak against? Does anybody have a neutral testimony? Does the applicant wish to provide rebuttal? All right. A harmonious situation. Public testimony portion of the hearing is now closed. Staff response to testimony. Does staff need to respond to anything raised in the testimony? No, sir. Does anybody on the Planning Commission or Board of Commissioners have any questions of staff? Board of Commissioners, do you have any questions of staff?
No, sir.
Does any Planning Commissioner have questions of staff? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion from somebody that moved to recommend that the Board of Commissioners approve Ordinance 17-04 based on the staff report and the testimony submitted this evening. If anybody's interested, they can say so moved.
So moved.
I'll take a second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move the recommendation the Board of Commissioners approve Ordinance 17-04 based on the staff report and the testimony submitted. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll take the roll call, please.
Commissioner Farrar,
Abstain?
Commissioner Murrow,
Approve.
Commissioner Presley,
Approved. Yes.
Commissioner Patrick,
I vote yes.
Commissioner Maynard,
Yes.
Chair Francis,
Yes.
Commissioner Wesley is excused.
Thank you. Congratulations.
According to my script here, Chair, I'm just going to go through the, thank you for the gavel. Is there any discussion by the board? Seeing no discussion by the board, the hearing will be continued to November 8th, when we will conduct the second reading by title only and make the final decision. Thank you. Thank you, Planning Commission. Thank you, Chair Francis. We are now moving on to our second hearing tonight of the joint hearing. I'm going to open up the second hearing, 1705. This is a public hearing. City of Seaside on Ordinance 1705, a proposed expansion of the Seaside urban growth boundary. If approved, the ordinance will bring the subject property into the city's urban growth boundary. The city has already approved the expansion. I ask for the first reading by title only. Staff?
Ordinance number 17-05, an ordinance adopting amendments to the Clatsop County Comprehensive Plan regarding the urban growth boundary for the city of Seaside.
Thank you. I now hand the
Well, yeah, let me just fix it.
I now handle the gavel to Chair Francis.
occurred. This is hearing 17-05. This is a public hearing on ordinance 17-05. The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. First, there'll be a staff report. There will be questions of staff from the Planning Commission or Board. Public testimony in the following order will be the applicant, any public agencies, testimony in support of the application, testimony opposing the application, any neutral testimony, rebuttal, if any, by the applicant. We'll then close the public testimony. After the record is closed for testimony, no other testimony, comments will be heard from anyone unless a member of the Planning Commission or Board has a specific question. Comments by staff, follow-up questions for staff, if any, from Commission or Board. Discussion by the Planning Commission, motion and decision. And discussion by the Board then continue to November the 8th for the second reading and final decision. If you wish to speak, please sign in. I'll recognise those people wishing to speak. Any questions should be addressed through me. Please state both your name and address for the record. When you come to the podium, if you are appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom you represent. Please keep testimony concise and to the point. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes. The criteria that apply to the decision are listed in the staff report. These are the criteria the county must use to reach a decision. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards these criteria or other criteria that you believe apply to the decision. Please describe how your comments relate to the criteria. Again, the decision on this application must be based on these criteria. Despite the importance of other issues or concerns, the county must base its decision on whether the evidence shows the application complies with the criteria. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford the Planning Commission, Board of Commissioners, all the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposal conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the county to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in the circuit court. Do any members of the Planning Commission or Board of Commissioners have any ex parte contacts, site visits, bias, or conflicts of interest to disclose?
Chair Francis, I'd note that I've had discussions years and years because I've been hearing about this in my community. I don't think that any conversations that I've had would lead me to have any bias. I can consider the facts as I vote, and only the facts.
Does any other commissioner have a conflict? Does any planning commissioner have a conflict? Once again, I got to reveal that my wife works for the school board, District 10. However, that's my wife, so therefore I feel I will be able to render a decision impartially based on the information presented and the testimony that's given at this time. Does anyone in the audience wish to challenge a member's impartiality?
Do you want people to sign in like you just said?
I'd love you to.
Where would you like me to sign? On one of these?
Yes, I'd love you to.
Where would you like it to go?
Then you pass it through to the chair. Thank you very much, sir.
You're very cool.
Okay, staff will now present the staff report.
Thank you. Good evening, chairs and commissioners and staff. Heather Hansen, Community Development Director. This item before you, as to piggyback on what you had said, Commissioner Farrar, it's more of your classic or standard type of UGB expansion request. The burden for justifying UGB expansion falls to the cities because it's their UGB, so they have to make the case for it. Specific procedures for UGB expansions are found in Oregon administrative rules and the comprehensive plans and in our urban growth management agreements. We have one between each of the cities, and it guides the process for that. The main role of the county is to make sure that the proposed UGB expansion follows state and county regulations. The city already adopted the UGB expansion, and once the county ordinance goes into effect, the property will have city zoning. So the staff report, I was not planning to go through the staff report. The applicant's representatives are going to make a presentation that goes into more detail, so I will refrain from repeating. But the required procedures were followed, and the school district and their consultants have done a massive amount of work to justify their request. It's very thorough and comprehensive. It was reviewed by various experts. There's lots of technical information that was provided. There's transportation analysis. They had the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries involved. DLCD was directly involved. This is a long-standing community effort, including school children, all the way up to state agencies. The two entities that are most likely to oppose the development of forest land, because this would go into what is now zoned F80 forest, forest land, showing on that diagram up there. It's a 39-acre portion of that 80-acre parcel. And I'm sorry, you guys have to turn around to look at it. So the two entities likely to oppose something like that would be DLCD or an environmental group. I'll just cover DLCD just as a sort of a lot of you folks know, but I'll just go over this. The main reason that the state of Oregon has the planning program that it has came about to protect farm and forest land, because what was happening is urban areas were sprawling out into farm and forest land, and there started to be lots of complaints. Oh, there's too much smell or noise, and it was affecting people's quality of life as well as the business practices of those kind of resource industries. So this is a model program that is known throughout the nation and in other countries as well. And so since the main purpose was to protect farm and forest land, the state would be the most likely to say, well, wait a second, you don't really need to expand into forest land. There's other opportunities. They're very strict about it and very, they look at this under a microscope. But they work closely with the state. And in your packet, there is a letter of support from Patrick Wingard from DLCD. And some of the highlights from that letter is that they have used they encourage a comprehensive risk-based approach for reducing exposure and vulnerability to natural hazards and potentially affect communities. They support this proposal 100%. They strongly support the goal of the city and the district to reduce life safety risk from tsunami. And then the other group, I would say, that would be an environmental group, and there is a letter of support from the Nicanacan Watershed Council that also praises the school district's process that they use that's very inclusive. And they have worked with the school district on another project, so they feel pretty confident that this project will achieve its environmental goals in protecting the stream corridors as well. So that letter is in your packet, and I'm going to go over briefly listing what was submitted as public comments that were submitted since your packet, you received your packet. So the Nicanacan Watershed Council and the state is supportive of this. And let me go back to, I'm almost done. So the city submitted complete copies of their record, and the record was so voluminous that this is the record and it's double-sided. So rather than have this in your packet, I picked out the parts that seem to address directly the decision that you'd be making. The rest of it was available online and in our office for anyone to review, and I do have it here. It's now present at this hearing. I'm going to submit it into the record. Also, since the packet went out, we received, and you have copies in front of you. There's a letter from Miller, Nash, Graham, and Dunn. They represent the applicants. An October 25th letter that looks like this is being entered into the record. There is also a October 25th letter from BRIC, B-R-I-C, Architect, Inc., regarding this expansion. That's going into the record. There is also this report on the statewide seismic needs assessment, implementation of Oregon 2005 Senate Bill 2 relating to public safety, earthquake, seismic rehabilitation of public buildings. and that's from 2007. So this is being entered into the record. And then there was the letter I was just referring to from the Nicanacan Watershed Council. Their coordinator, Melissa Graper, she wrote a letter dated October 23rd. And then a citizen from Seaside, John Dunzer, submitted, I don't know how many pages it is.
28 pages.
Thank you. Okay, so this is it double-sided, so that's being entered into the record as well. And other than that, unless you have questions, I was just going to say that, you know, I'm done with my staff presentation, and the recommendation is to ultimately approve the UGB expansion for the purpose of mainly getting the school children outside of the tsunami zones.
Does any commissioner have a question of staff?
I didn't even go through these other ones.
I see none, Chair.
Okay. Does any planning commissioner have a question of staff? I just had one question. The recommendation letter from LCDC, Patrick Wingard, made comments, I think on the third page, as to what should happen with the abandoned property. How did the city view that? It's only a recommendation.
Yeah, it was a suggestion,
Yeah.
and I think it would be best, since I wasn't part of the city process, to let the applicant address that, okay? Is that all right?
Now that you've introduced everything, I guess there are no additional correspondence beyond those items that you've put?
No, that was it, yeah.
All right. Thank you for your testimony.
Okay. Thank you.
So the applicant may now present their proposal. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Sheila Rowley, and I am the superintendent of schools in Seaside, and I reside most of my time at 1801 South Franklin in Seaside, and I come home occasionally to sleep at 436 Jerome Avenue in Astoria. I want to say first of all, thank you to the county commissioners as well as the planning commissioners for your time and your volunteerism to be here to hear our request for an amendment to the urban growth boundary. As you've heard from your staff person, this has been a long and challenging road to be here, and it's really, we're excited and just overwhelmed as we go through this process at the amount of community involvement, both from our own community and from the county, our collaboration with the city to help us along this, and we're just looking forward to being able to present to you what we feel is the importance of our work in expanding the urban growth boundary so that we can move our students into an appropriate location where they will be safe and receive an education, the education they deserve in a beautiful environment. We have a great deal of place-based education in our curriculum, and we feel just incredibly fortunate to have gotten this far. I would also like to note that we come with the support of 67% of our voters who voted yes on a very large school bond for a community our size of $99.7 million to help make this a reality for our community. So with that being said, again, thank you. I have folks who are much more knowledgeable on the nuances of this request than I am, and I have a team doing a presentation. Now, they did not sign in individually. Was that something that they should? That's fine.
They can state their name and address for the record.
Okay, and so I have some members of my school community, plus some of the consultants that have been assisting us in this project, and we'll begin with my predecessor, Doug Doherty, who can give you a little bit of history on the development of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Francis. Commissioners, thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. I'm Doug Doherty. I'm Superintendent Emeritus of Seaside School District, and I've been working on this project for over 25 years. In 1992, I started the first tsunami drills in the U.S. At Cannon Beach Elementary School. I co-led town hall meetings later that year and for the next couple years in Cannon Beach to inform the community of earthquake and tsunami preparedness issues. In '95, as you know, Degami made the recommendation that the legislature set a tsunami inundation zone line. It's currently set at approximately 38 feet up and down the Oregon coast. This includes, the reason for that line is to identify essential facilities that are not to be in the tsunami inundation zone. And so you cannot build new facilities of either schools, hospitals, police departments, or fire departments in the current tsunami inundation zone. There are currently 4 schools in Oregon that are in the tsunami inundation zone. Gerhardt Elementary, Broadway Middle School, Seaside High School, that are all within our school district, and Neocani High School. They are all 5 to 15 feet in elevation. I commissioned the first a study for Degami to do. I needed to find out how high to relocate our schools, and so I commissioned a study that Degami, I needed scientific proof to show what had actually happened previously in our area with Cascadia events. And so I paid Degami to do this research. It was to take 2 months and be about $30,000. It ended up being about 4 years and costing millions and millions of dollars. I only had to pay the section that I committed to, but I got a phone call 2 weeks into the study from the core drillings because it had to be based on, I needed it to be based on science. And they said, we're finding things here we didn't have any idea of, and that's when they went to NOAA and some federal, and got a lot of federal money to make this happen. My study was also in concurrence with Chris Goldfinger's recurrence interval study, which shows recurrence intervals of Cascadia events. Over the past 10,000 years, our study was also linked with theirs. Our study is also 10,000 years. And what did we learn from our study? We learned that the strength of Cascadia subduction zone events are only 8s and 9s in magnitude. We learned that the recurrence interval is, over the past 10,000 years, there have been, right now they identified 43 previous Cascadia events over that 10,000 years on average, and we know that nothing happens in averages geologically, but if you did have it in average, it would be 234 years. We are 317 years currently since our previous, most recent Cascadia event. So I brought together the city managers from Cannon Beach, Gerhardt, and Seaside, and explained this situation to them. And I said, is there any land within your urban growth boundaries that we can relocate our schools? And each one, to a person, said no, they do not have any land. The only land was owned by Weyerhaeuser. And this multi-billion-dollar company was my next group to start negotiations with. And after 2 years of negotiations with them, and I knew from working with DLCD for a long time, in fact, with DLCD, they basically said, you've got to first deal with contiguous pieces of property, and so that's exactly what we did. I went to Weyerhaeuser, and what they allowed me to do was to investigate 1,000 acres of their property to find the very best of contiguous property, to find the very best piece of property for us to build schools. And I looked from south of Bearman Creek up north of Seaside. And we accessed many firms to help us with our due diligence with this. We had 7 different architectural firms working with me on this project over the past 25 years. 8 geotech firms doing LIDAR, core drillings, inclinometers to find slide issues and all types of things like that. I had 3 wetlands delineation specialist firms working on this. I had local partners, Pat Corcoran from OSU, Providence at one time. When I came before you about 7, 8 years ago with Providence, we changed the comp plan for that, and I appreciate your help with that. And so in a lot of different groups, Congresswoman Bonamici, Senators Wyden and Merkley, both Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley had 2 $10 million requests in for Seaside School District to help offset the cost of our local construction costs. They had hearings, but it didn't go anywhere. And so we went forward with the bond in 2013. It did not pass, and so what I immediately did is I went out and held listening sessions, and I went around and listened to our community, households, various organizations and things like that, and I came away with three main things that they said consistently. One was it was too expensive. The cost was $2.16 per thousand. We reduced that, our board, we were able to reduce that by 37.5% to $1.35 per thousand. The second issue was we didn't own the land. There's no way we could purchase the land because Weyerhaeuser was basically, we did not have millions and millions of dollars to be able to buy the land out front, and so we had to include that in the bond cost. And, what I ended up doing was I went back and I ended up going national with a lot of publicity, and some of you may have read the New Yorker articles. You may have seen on CBS Sunday Morning or CBS Evening News or the News Hour or some of those different things that I was interviewed on, just trying to explain to the government, this is a small school district that needs all the help it can get to save the lives of children. The other piece, and so I worked with Weyerhaeuser. That pressure enabled me to get them to donate the property, 80 acres, at no cost at all. And the third piece was they basically said, you've got to do this person by person, if at all possible. You've got to hold community meetings, neighborhood meetings, and that's what told me that I needed to retire. And so, because a superintendent cannot run a bond or be involved in getting a bond to pass. And so I knew in order for me to do that, because no one else, I had been working on this for so long, I couldn't really get anybody else up to speed quickly enough. And so I retired, and I'm very, very glad I did. I went back, and prior to the election, I held over 70 meetings in our community with in various neighborhoods and with different leadership groups to obtain input on relocating the schools. And the district and the campaign group, we use that information in our bond. And as you heard about this time last year, we were able to pass the bond with the highest rate of any bond passing in the state of Oregon at that time. And so with that, I'll conclude, and I will invite up our business manager, Justine Hill. Thank you. Oh, please, yes.
Are there any questions?
Oh, please, any questions?
Chair Francis, just one. The value of the Weyerhaeuser land, the value of their donation?
The value is very difficult. I'll tell you this, at one time, they were asking what would be in the neighborhood of approximately $2.5 million.
Thank you.
Does any planning commission have questions? I do.
Yes, please. Thanks, Bruce.
So a couple of the things I took away from your presentation is that we're 317 years past an event that happens every 300 years on average. We have 10,000 years of accumulated data that says we haven't had the big one for 10,000 years.
We've had 43. We've had 43 big ones over 10,000 years.
9 or greater?
Of 8s and 9s.
Two, but
So
when I was talking to Dr. Corcoran, he and I got into a little debate on that. And he said, what's the likelihood of having a 9 or greater? And I said, well, if you haven't had one really in 10,000 years, it seems to me that it's pretty likely.
And it only throws up 8s and 9s. The Cascadia subduction zone does not create anything that's really under an 8. And so that's the thing with Cascadia. You're going to get a lot, maybe in areas near the land and things, but the actual Cascadia subduction zone that's 70 miles approximately off our coast, it only throws up 8s and 9s.
All right. So if we get into subduction, what in your best estimate would happen to the existing school sites?
Thank you.
The subduction average I'm hearing is anywhere from 8 to 12 feet. Does that render the existing school sites unbuildable or inhabitable or definitely could be close to sea level?
Okay, I know exactly what you're saying, and I appreciate the question because that's exactly what our study was to do. Our study was to scientifically prove what's happened. And what they were able to do is they were able to show that those have happened, and the recommendation from the two principal researchers at Dagami said you've got to get your schools at least 80 to 100 feet in elevation to be safe because of what they found with the study. And so the schools that where they're currently located being fewer than 15 feet and being made of, we've also had the schools evaluate, we didn't have them evaluated, the state came and did a rapid response, and they say they will crumble in a major earthquake. And
So we're not only dealing with the inundation of the water.
correct.
We're dealing with a problem that is ongoing for the restoration of the site for habitability. I'll get it out. So I think that's a major concern that maybe a lot of us don't understand, that to rebuild on the existing site, I think it's not a very good idea. It doesn't appear to be from all the scientific data that you've presented to us.
Correct. And thank you.
Thank you. No other questions? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
State your name and address for the record.
Justine Hill, Seaside School District. I'm also an SHS graduate. My address is 1368 Garden Terrace in Gerhardt, Oregon. The expansion of the UGB for the Consolidated School Campus will provide students to direct hands-on environmental education tools. The outdoors will become an extended classroom. On campus, they will be able to access a wetland area totaling approximately 9.2 acres, 2 waterway tributaries to the Neawanna Creek, which are designated essential salmonid habitat, and multiple forested areas which are habitat for a variety of both wildlife and plant life. Our community is extremely fortunate to live in an area where there are so many outdoor learning opportunities, and this new school campus location is ideally situated to maximize contact with the outdoors. Since 1999, the school district has been searching for a suitable site for our schools to be relocated. During that time, we have partnered with key contributors like the Seaside Hospital, Weyerhaeuser, OTAC, Dagami, the cities of Seaside, Cannon Beach, and Gerhardt, the Department of Land, Conservation and Development, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Kanakam Watershed. These contributors were not only project foundation builders, but advocates, supporters, and project enhancers. For example, in 2011, the deterioration of the Coho Creek culvert under Spruce Loop Drive, going up to the Seaside Heights Elementary School, evolved into an extremely successful program and demonstrates the powers of collective forces. With the amazing support from the City of Seaside and the dynamic determination of the Kanakam Watershed, the school district was able to benefit from a fully funded project. The project was significantly elevated in scope to better enhance Coho Creek. The project helped open up access to 0.9 miles of spawning and rearing habitat for the Oregon Coast coho salmon. It provides students educational opportunities, and it also allows safe and reliable access to the elementary school and the tsunami assembly area. So that culvert is already in place and will be an extension of the if it gets approved, of our campus for K-12 students. The school district wants an environmentally positive project. In 2013, Doug Gray partnered with the North Coast Land Conservancy, the Kanakam Watershed, and the Oregon Fish and Wildlife to offer, quote, more than 100 years of collective professional experience with landscape ecology, wetlands ecology, fisheries, and public infrastructure to ensure that the new campus is the most sustainable design, and construction possible with the least impacts to the Cohoe Creek watershed, so its functions and support of fish and wildlife can continue with the education and safety of children," unquote. We hope to be able to take advantage of our environmental leaders to ensure that our campus site has limited impacts on a watershed with a federal and state listed salmon species. The school district is committed to being an environmental steward. We want our students to recognize their unique location and allow them to explore the natural surroundings that the new school campus site has to offer. We want a location that integrates our amazing outdoor spaces while still provides safe, fun facilities.
Does any commissioner have a question for Ms. Hill? Does any planning commissioner have questions of Ms. Hill? I have a question. Well, sorry, go ahead.
I have one quick question. So this will be in an assembly area as well?
Uh,
High school and...
We have an agreement with Providence Seaside Hospital that they can access that site, and it is a known community assembly area.
Okay, so the new site will be as well?
Mhm.
Thank you.
So in your testimony, you committed yourself to being responsible stewards of the watershed. I just have a question which I'll throw at you. How do you control 1,500 children hunting frogs at BCC?
Well, that creates some...
Obviously, we're going to have rules and barriers and things, and you're going to address it. I'm hoping that you do have a plan in place that addresses inquisitive children, because I see that as being the only maybe problem that we would have.
I think that a lot of our children are already going to schools that are around areas that already surround natural habitat, and so they are used to that. And we, at Seaside Heights, I mean, there's over 400 students there, and they actively participate already with salmon. I mean, they get little eggs and they grow them and they release them into the river. And a lot of our teachers, high school included, and the elementary school, use the site already up there for tracking animal habitat. I mean, I think we have a very conscientious student body, and yes, we will ensure that the watersheds are protected.
And it seems to me, as part of your program, you have teachers who are offering guided tours and courses and instruction, and I think that you could probably take quite a bit of the impulse out of self-investigation from organised groups dealing with the environment and the closeness of that. So I think that's the only thing that I would see, keep in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
I would like to introduce Robert Rusk, our Broadway Middle School principal.
Okay. Please state your name and address for the record.
Evening, County Commissioners. Sorry about that. My name is Robert Rusk. Address P.O. Box 454, Seaside, Oregon 97138. I just want to first off say thank you so much for your time and service. I have the privilege of being the Broadway Middle School principal. The staff and I have the pleasure of assisting 350 students in meeting and exceeding their aspirations. I take this job as a public official very seriously and use the following guiding principle: is it in the best interest of kids? I use this guiding principle as a steadfast rule when implementing change, working with teachers, parents, and most importantly, when working with students. The other day, during the Great American Shakeout, Broadway Middle School conducted an earthquake and tsunami drill. At the end of the drill, we brought the entire school into the gym and discussed what we would do if the bridge collapsed and we could not make it up to the hill safely. I have to admit, it was not a conversation we wanted to have with 350 students who looked worried. However, it was in the best interest of kids to go over the next steps when dealing with an earthquake and potential tsunami when we inhabit a school in the tsunami zone, which was constructed with unreinforced concrete and in need of repairs. But there are several more reasons why expanding the UGB and moving into a new campus is in the best interest of kids. Being together as one educational campus means that teachers and students can collaborate and assist each other to improve the learning environment, while being able to take advantage of the wonderful outdoor setting that will serve as an additional classroom. I once heard former President Obama advise that the government is an agency that ensures that all students are getting the opportunities they deserve. Tonight, the county government has a chance to ensure that our students will receive the access and opportunities they deserve by allowing the Seaside School District to expand the UGB and build schools that will be safe and collaborative and set in a beautiful environment. And that's it.
Thank you. Does any commissioner have a question?
No, sir.
Does any, sorry?
No, sir.
No? Does any planning commissioner have a question? Thank you very much.
And I'll introduce Ms. DeLuz is our Seaside High School student.
Just state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Majestic DeLuz, and I'm a 4.0 junior at Seaside High School.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's not easy. I truly appreciate the chance I've been given to speak with you tonight. When I get the opportunity to meet with people, I'm often asked what drives me to get 2 jobs, start my college classes, and have my future somewhat planned out at 16 years old. I think about my drive to make an impact. Big or small, all I want to do with my life is make a difference. Whether in the lives of individuals or in my community, I want to make a change. I've lived in this area for 13 years now, and I've utterly fallen in love with not only our stunning views and sunsets, captivating landscapes, but our community. I speak to you tonight on behalf of not only the Seaside School District, but on behalf of our community. Being a student in Seaside, I've participated in many earthquake drills and tsunami evacuation drills. Knowing that the subduction zone earthquake and the tsunami that follows are unavoidable, I ask of you tonight to keep us safe. When this disaster hits, the odds of our high school students making it out of danger's way is very slim. Our current evacuation route requires us to walk over Neawanna Creek on a bridge that might not even be standing after the earthquake hits. Even though I myself will not be able to enjoy a new high school, it is essential to me that the generation that follows is guaranteed to survive this inevitable event that we've had all this time to plan for. I would like to go off to college knowing that the next generation's safety is guaranteed in this place that I call home. In conclusion, I leave you with this. If your kids or grandkids are attending Seaside High School while this disaster strikes, would you want them in our current deteriorating building or in a new, safely located school? Thank you for your time and letting me speak with you tonight.
Does any commissioner have a question?
Well, I just have a comment.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does any planning commissioner have a comment? I too. Did you write your dissertation?
I did.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you. I will turn the floor over to our consultants.
Thank you. Hard to follow, isn't it? Please state your name and address for the record.
That's what I was going to say, a hard act to follow. Yeah, my name is Greg Winterroad. My address is 310 Southwest 4th Avenue in Portland. And it's my extreme pleasure to represent the Seaside School District and to have prepared this somewhat voluminous application before you. I'm going to make my presentation pretty short, but I would like to point out a few things. First of all, if this application is approved by the county, it's already been approved by the city, we would then be able to apply for a conditional use permit, a master plan for development. So we don't have a specific plan on the table. We have a generalized concept plan that will be refined. The second thing is that the plan that is shown in this document toward the end is a preliminary concept plan, and what that does is show why we need 49 acres. It wasn't a number that was pulled out of a hat. We have athletic fields, buildings, parking lots, and we also have a site that is, has some steepness to it, and so that means more terracing is required, so it's not the same as a flat site. As noted by your able community development director, and I'll shout out a goodbye to Heather, because I've known her a long time, and she'll be missed here. I mean, she'll be missed in Oregon. It is unusual. I probably worked on 40 to 50 urban growth boundary amendments in my career. That's something I specialize in. To have a letter like that from the Department of Land Conservation and Development is amazing. But the reason we got that letter was not because I wrote a great application. It's these guys and the work that they've done over 25 years. They're wonderful clients to work for. I can assure you that we have addressed all statewide planning goals, Goal 14, the Goal 14 administrative rules. We looked at your comprehensive plan, we looked at the Seaside comprehensive plan, your code, city's code, and that's why we have a long application, because there's a lot to address. But we did put a lot of effort into that, again, with a lot of help from the district folks. Something that I know you're aware of is that in 2010, the City of Seaside Comprehensive Plan was amended to include 7 criteria for expanding an urban growth boundary to meet school needs. State law allows local governments to do this because state law anticipated that there are special types of needs that require special types of sites. And in the document I handed out, those 7 criteria are listed. The biggest one, though, is no surprise. The schools need to be located outside the designated tsunami inundation zone. That was a policy choice that was made by the city and I think endorsed by the county that recognized what you've heard in testimony so far, that it makes a lot of sense to get those schools out of the tsunami zone because they're a danger to life and property in their current location. It's also notable that in the administrative rules themselves, in what they call Division 24, the Urban Growth Boundary Rule, there is a parallel standard that allows local governments to exclude any land that's within a tsunami inundation zone from further consideration for urban growth boundary amendments. In other words, if you're in the tsunami zone, it's not a good place to development. So if you have exception areas, for example, or lower quality farmland, you could say, we don't want to go in the tsunami zone. We want to go a place outside. So the state rule actually mirrors what is in the city comprehensive plan, which often doesn't happen in my experience. Sure.
What is that rule? What number is that?
It's OAR 660, Division 24, and the specific standard is mentioned in the application that we put together. It's a good question.
And I was just going to follow up on that. This ordinance is in the Seaside Comprehensive Plan?
It is.
And is in step with Goal 14?
Yes.
Organisation?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. And that is if you look at the application in detail, we rely heavily on those 7 criteria as well as the Division 4 standards. And they dovetail beautifully in the situation. They don't always do that, but in this situation they did. So now I would like to take a moment to address Mr. Dunzer's comments, okay? Because this is the 3rd time at the Planning Commission meeting on August the 1st, at the City Council meeting on 9/13, and now this meeting, Mr. Dunzer has raised what he calls 10 errors in the application.
Before you go on with that, do you wish to make that as a rebuttal now? When I appear, Mr. Dunzer you'll have a chance later on to rebut anything that he says.
Yeah.
You want to do it?
Mr. Chair, what I'd like to do is introduce the subject, and perhaps get your mind in tune as you listen to Mr. Dunzer, if that's possible.
Yes.
Thank you.
And please keep in mind, as the applicant, I will give you rebuttal after.
Which is appreciated.
After
Yes.
the testimony.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So we feel that at each of these situations, we have addressed Mr. Dunzer's comments. We provided factual information. We've provided information that's relevant to the statewide planning goals, the criteria that apply. And yet, the 10 alleged errors keep coming up. The main point that Mr. Dunzer has raised in this iteration is that the district failed to look at alternative sites inside the UGB. That is untrue. We looked carefully, not just me when I did very careful application, but Dr. Doherty when he did his review years ago, and that's also documented in this little handout. One of the major disagreements we have with Mr. Dunzer is that he says, well, you should consider keeping the Broadway Middle School open and seismically upgrade it and then turn it into a high school because it's only 625 yards away to the safety. The district rejected that option long ago because not all children are track stars, not all people are totally ambulatory, and people could easily be hurt if there were an earthquake and the building fell down partially. Even if it didn't collapse, people could be injured. So this is, to us, a public safety issue. The other point is that he fails to recognize that the comprehensive plan itself, as does state statute that Dr. Doherty mentioned, prohibits the new buildings inside or replacement buildings inside the tsunami zone. So in a sense, it doesn't matter whether one person thinks it's a great idea to pour lots of money into a 1949 building and try to turn it into a modern high school. And I'm now speaking with some emotion, I suppose, because this is the third time we've been through this, and there's a threat of appeal if we don't somehow follow what he suggested. And it's an open public threat. So we do now feel that we've had enough of this, that we believe we've met our burden of proof, and we would ask that you look carefully at the application and see if you agree. I would like to have Dan Hess, who's a project architect, address some of the issues that he had with some of Mr. Dunzer's analysis as well. So Dan?
Before you leave, does anybody in the commission have questions?
No.
Does any planning commissioner have questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Who do I talk to about traffic flows and...
Speaking to the mic, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Who do I talk to about the traffic flows and traffic reports? Would that be...
We don't have our traffic engineer here today, but I can attempt. We do, here's what I can say at this point, is that we have done a thorough traffic analysis. We are located, served by a major collector street that has adequate capacity with minor improvements where Wahana comes into Spruce Drive, a right turn lane, to handle anticipated traffic from the application, from the development when it occurs. And the study concludes that we meet what's called the Oregon Transportation Planning Rule, which I'm guessing you're familiar with, and that we don't have a significant impact with proposed improvements on this state highway system or major streets in the city of Seaside.
So I have a quick question about
Sure.
ingress, egress, and flow.
Mhm.
And it seems like there's only one road in and one road out.
Yeah.
And
That is a great question, and spoken like a true planning commissioner, if I might say so, because it's also a fire requirement, right, to have that access. And one of the criteria, one of the 7 criteria that I was talking about earlier, demands, doesn't ask, it demands that you have 2 access points. One to a public street, and the other for emergency access. And so what we did is worked with Weyerhaeuser Corporation to use their Forest Service access road as the emergency access, and the Seaside Fire Department has concurred with that work. Again, it's not something I did, it's the folks at the district that did all this work.
So that road, you guys didn't want to annex it in with this?
Well, if you look at, the road itself will actually skim the eastern portion of the land that's being included in the UGB. It's proposed for inclusion in the UGB, but most of it is outside, and if we had tried to include the road, that would have been taking way too much forest land out of production. Okay.
So Chair Francis, now I have a question. Thank you, Mr. Merrill. I'm looking at this. I assume you're just shifting existing traffic, not increasing it, but when I'm thinking about Avenue S and people turning left onto Highway 101 from Avenue S.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about that, and I have heard ODOT laughingly refer to Wahana as the Wahanabon. So I'm thinking about...
I hadn't heard that, but I understand the meaning.
It's a bad joke. It's traffic engineer humor. Sorry, Mr. Summers. But have you contemplated the impact on those neighborhoods back there of shifting the traffic?
On the neighborhoods, on Cooper Drive, you're thinking?
Cooper Drive and all along Wahana.
And that, in fact, came up a great deal at the Planning Commission. We also met with the City Traffic Commission on that issue, and our traffic engineer looked at that issue. There is an expected something like a 30% of the traffic could potentially go down Cooper, although most of it would go down Spruce Drive. And one of the things that concerned some neighbors and ourselves, and so one of the things we are doing in the next phase of the application, when we're actually proposing buildings, is to meet with the neighbors on Spruce Drive and in the Wahana area and say, what can we do realistically and consistent with city policy to mitigate traffic impacts? There will be increased traffic for sure. S Drive and the intersection with 101, I believe, was looked at in the traffic impact study. And there is some waiting time, and it's not a great intersection, but it did not warrant additional treatment, according to the traffic engineers. Okay, so and I understand that not everyone agrees with traffic engineers all the time. But we did look at it, and it does meet requirements. The other thing is we looked at the possibility of stop signs along Wahana to slow down, what did you call that again? The Wahanabon.
The Wahanabon.
And the city does have the ability to lower the speed limit there, but you have to meet warrants for stop signs, and stop signs were not warranted except where Spruce meets Wahanabon. Wahana Drive, sorry. So, I mean, this issue was looked at. All I can say is there will be increased traffic. The city has the ability to condition our application, and we will be working with the neighborhood on these issues before we submit the application.
Well, my only concern is that that Avenue S, that's how I go by that every time I come north to Astoria, and I just watched a crash nearly happen today. Now, I understand traffic engineers have manuals and they look at car crash data and all that kind of thing, but if that road, if there are traffic crashes there, that's a severe impediment to business and any other kind of activity that's going through there. And traffic signals are very expensive, I understand. So just trying to anticipate where problems may arise.
So here's the other thing to think about. And I know you know this, so I don't mean to be preaching at you, but the city of Seaside has a transportation system plan. And it has many improvements that are called for over the next 20 years. The Seaside School District, when they build this, will be paying systems development charges, which can be used to help alleviate the problem.
Okay.
I'm not saying there isn't a problem, but to help alleviate.
Thank you.
Good questions. Thank you.
Just one other thing on the traffic. I was concerned with these tables where you have the LOS figure given. it's a letter code that A through F that shows the functionality of the intersection with the human traffic. And the one, of course, that's got the F for 2036 projection is there on Spruce Drive. And the only reason I'm bringing it up now is I know this is kind of early to know exactly what your project's like and all that. But in fairness to the public that may be impacted by what will be significant increases in traffic, if you go and look at the other little circle diagrams there, many of these intersections will experience as many as 200 cars an hour more during the peak hours. And that's a lot to add to some of these intersections. It's taking them up 150% or more, maybe 200% of what they're carrying now. In fairness, I think this data could be shown some way that's more easy to get through. I tackled this section of the packet last this afternoon. I finally forced myself to go through it. And I was not surprised by seeing a lot of traffic congestion, but I think you ought to, for the final plan and to get input from the neighborhood there that's going to get really impacted by this, it'd be nice to have a better way to show it and show it more by the amount of time you're going to be sitting there at the stop sign. And I know that's kind of incorporated in these other figures here, but it's not easy to go through this at all.
And I agree, and when we do a public presentation, I think we need more understandable graphics. We did explicitly talk about the waiting times at Spruce and Wahana. I believe there was something like 47 seconds on average, which...
Long time.
Yeah, no, I know. Unless you're listening to really good music or something, right? You don't want to be there. But that, again, I'm not saying there's not an issue. I'm saying that it's an issue that didn't rise to the level of being of state concern, which is a different thing. But I agree we need to look at that. The other thing the district has talked about with me, specifically Sheila, is that there are ways that we can, I hate this word sometimes, mitigate, reduce the traffic impact by staggering work hours, educating students, encouraging people to carpool, and that kind of thing. And the district has indicated a willingness to look at those kind of options and not simply snub the nose of the neighborhood. The other thing is we did have 2 people from Cooper Drive who were parents of children who said, we understand there's more traffic, we support the application. So, I mean, there's been some outreach already on this. Okay.
I'd like to make a comment on that. I think that what the commissioners and the planning commissioners want to keep in mind is that the process we're going through is to take F80 forestry land and bring it into the urban growth boundary. Now, there'll be plenty of opportunities. This is not the end of the line, guys. This is step 1. We're allowing the incorporated city to make decisions through the application that will come with building permits, and the mitigation or whatever happens will be in the city of Seaside's jurisdiction. So I wouldn't belabor this point too much. I think that the first presentation is to get us to the point that we are not deciding that we are allowing a catastrophe to occur. If the numbers are at all acceptable, we should go ahead and respect that and allow the city of Seaside to make the final determination on the yay or nay of the process, and if any mitigation is required. And that's what I would kind of like to bring to everybody's attention. Are there any other questions, please? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thanks. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Dan Hess. My address is 1223 Northwest Northrop Street, Portland, 97209. I'm a principal with Brick Architecture, and I'm one of the 7 architects that Dr. Doherty referenced as helping the district with this project over the years. Myself and my colleagues have worked for the district for over 10 years in the planning of this important project. And I always tell everybody I work with that We do school projects, and all school projects are important, but some rise to the top, and then every once in a while, there's one that's really up there, and this is a career project. This, for environmental reasons and for the safety of the children, this is something unique and special, and we're just honored to be part of it. Just to follow up on Greg's comments about some of the issues and ideas raised by Mr. Dunzer, I want to comment on 3 of those. You have my memo. The first, I'll keep my comments brief, but the idea of reusing Broadway Middle School and converting it into a high school, providing seismic upgrades, et cetera. And I've worked for 28 years doing schools, over 150 projects. I have never encountered a project where we took a middle school and turned it into a high school. There's challenges with that. First of all, the age of the building, the seismic upgrades would be significant. I do want to clarify also that just because a building is not rated for collapse, that doesn't mean it wouldn't be seriously damaged in a seismic event. And so the prudent thing to do in planning for the next 30 to 50 years for this school would be to do a full seismic upgrade, and that would be significant. Building systems would need to be updated. Mechanical, electrical, fire and life safety, these things are obviously out of date, and to meet current codes and future use would have to be updated. Building envelope, waterproofing, insulation, all these things would need to be upgraded. But more importantly, possibly, at least from my point of view, is the educational planning. The idea of taking a middle school and trying to transform it into a high school is challenging. Middle schools are designed as that transitional phase between elementary and high school. So they're designed differently. They're designed sort of in learning groups that are based on grade level. They don't have the same curriculum that a high school has. They don't have the same electives. A high school, on the other hand, is designed to provide opportunities at all grade levels for a variety of career explorations. So a high school has a variety of specialized labs, a different classroom layout. It's not based on grade level, it's based on interest in academic development. And then the core facilities such as admin, counseling, a career center, things like that are different and unique in a high school. So it's, nothing's impossible, but it would be unusual to take a middle school and transform it into a high school. The second thing I wanted to comment on was the idea of taking the existing Seaside Heights site and finding a home within that site for, originally the idea was presented as middle school, high school. I think now it's been presented as just the middle school, but nevertheless, sure, it's a 50-acre site, but on this whole site that you're looking at up here, the most challenging slopes are in that 50 acres of the Seaside Heights site. If you've been there, you can see it's sort of a pancake with very steep slopes. Our feeling and our judgment, and with the recommendations of geotechnical consultants, are to avoid going into those steep slopes as much as possible. If you were going to try to build a middle school on this site while maintaining the existing elementary school, you would probably have to put it in the existing parking lot. Mr. Dunzer acknowledged that possibility by saying potentially parking structure with a school above it. By my calculations, you have about 20,000 square feet to work with. If you're planning for 150 cars and about a 70,000 square foot middle school with probably a gym on top, I think you're looking at least a couple floors of parking, and then for 3 to 5 stories above it of school building. There's a reason you've never seen that in Oregon. It would be very expensive and very difficult and very challenging. And from an architect's perspective, I think it would be odd to have a multi-story building right up next to an elementary school building. And then finally, even if you did that, where would you put the play fields? So the third point I wanted to address was the idea that, well, you don't need to build play fields for this site because the city has these terrific fields at Broadway, adjacent to the Broadway Middle School, which is true, they do. But those are competition fields. So it's important to understand that in the school curriculum, physical education is an important part of the overall curriculum. It's even in my memo, I noted that House Bill, I think it's 3141, is requiring additional physical education time for K through 8 students. Many of our clients that we're working with around the state are struggling with how to adapt their buildings to deal with this. Essentially, though, what I would say is fields on a school site, sure, they are partly for competition, but they're primarily for the physical education curriculum for all the students. So the idea that you could use fields elsewhere, that you'd have to bus kids to, seems really impractical and not really in keeping with the expectations of House Bill 3141. Any questions?
Does any commissioner have a question?
No.
Hearing none, does any planning commissioner have a question? Thank you.
Thank you.
This concludes the district's presentation.
Wait!
I'm the guy paying the bill.
We've got one more.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Greg.
Please state the name.
Yeah. Mark Truax. I am Vice Chairman of the School District Board of Directors. I approve checks. I live at 88599 Highway 101 Seaside, which is really the county. As you can see by, I guess, for another lack of a word, testimony, the school district has worked diligently to try and find land to build a school on, to build schools on. This is my 19th year on the school board. It was a project that was in place when I started. The first board meeting I went to was in Cannon Beach, and we were discussing with the city of Cannon Beach about building up in the presidential streets. Unfortunately, or fortunately, that didn't work out. But we looked high and low, left and right, and the only thing that's big enough for what we need is up on the hill. Granted, and from a lot of what I've heard tonight, it's a tough place to build. There is going to be some traffic impact. It's not anything that the district hasn't thought of. When I was elected to the school board, I never thought I'd be sitting in front of the Clatsop County Commissioners as well as the Planning Commission giving testimony. That wasn't in the job description. I'd rather be on that side than down here. We need schools. Our schools are old, and they're talking about Broadway Middle School. Well, that was my mom's school. My grandchildren are there. I don't think a great-grandchild should be in. That's just, something's wrong with that picture. In a perfect world, we could have built them or remodeled them or done what we needed on the property we currently own or on their site, but it's just because of, we got to get them up out of this tsunami ionization zone. They got to go up on a hill. The only hill big enough in Seaside is above, the Seaside Heights. A quick explanation of, I'm not sure everybody understands exactly what we're doing. I mean, it's in the project. We're remodeling the Heights, closing Gearhart and bringing the Seaside Heights, and we're closing Gearhart and bringing them to Seaside. We're adding a 2-story wing, and then the new building will be a single building, high school, middle school, kind of winged with support in the middle, with gyms on both sides. There will be play fields up there, practice fields, much like we have now, as well as the track up there. I appreciate, taking time and to come in and, to go over this, and any questions?
Any questions by commissioners? Any questions by planning commissioners? Did we put enough pressure on you?
Me?
Yeah.
Not really. It wasn't so bad.
So, I've got to ask one question. No, really, we seem like we're being bound by time limits, by regulatory limits, and we should take advantage of time and low interest rates. It appears to me to be a culmination of events that precludes the storm that's going to happen. We actually have the right storm financially. We're at a situation, like you said, that it's all come together after many, many, many years of us working on this. And so far, I haven't seen anything that detracts from moving forward with the proposition everybody has put forward. You know, I always sit here and I listen to all the testimony and I try and find fault with it. But it appears to me that you have analysed everything as well as can be expected. And we as a county are going to throw it back in the lap of Seaside to make the hard decisions.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
testimony.
Sure.
Thank you. The check is in the mail. Do any public agencies wish to speak on this? Do we have any public agencies involved in this? Mechanical Watershed, LCDC, anybody? Nobody. Does anybody wish to speak in favour of the application? Does anyone wish to speak against the application?
I'm the famous John Denser, 2964 Keepsake Drive, Seaside.
Mr. Denzer, before you start, please want to make sure that you understand your testimony is for 3 minutes. And after 3 minutes, your testimony will be on record and that you will cease. 30 seconds from 3 minutes, I will give you a 30-second warning. I just want you to be cognizant of that.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Planning Goal 14 says, prior to expanding an urban growth boundary, local governments shall demonstrate that needs cannot reasonably be accommodated on land already inside the urban growth boundary. That, I believe, is an excellent goal. And I think that the state kept in mind that they didn't want the things sprawling out when they could be accommodated inside. And that there was a tendency for people to want to make local communities to say, gee, wouldn't it be nice to be bigger and stronger, do all of this sort of stuff. Okay. Nobody has ever really looked at using, until just in the last few days, using the Broadway School, even though I've been bringing it up for 2 or 3 years, that should be done. As far as I can tell, the state says that those buildings will not collapse, with the exception of the boys' gym, which will collapse. The state says is that it's a perfectly reasonable thing to not have to move the school if the kids can, after an earthquake, have 15 minutes to get to a safe place. If you have kids at Broadway Middle School, they can get to a safe place within 10 to 15 minutes. We have thousands of people in Seaside that have to cross 11 bridges that are not seismically equipped, including these kids who 71% of the time are not in school. So it makes a lot of sense to me they're spending $80,000 per student when around in the state of Oregon, they typically spend $40,000 a student to provide school facilities. We're spending $80,000 to be ultra safe for the kids. And I think that's exactly, if I were on the school board, that's exactly what I would be doing. But as a responsible person, I've got to worry about those kids, the 71% of the time they're not in school. I've got to worry about the thousands of other people. And we need to build these bridges so that they're seismically correct. That is the biggest need that we have. And it's all wonderful. I have 7 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, and I've been on 3 school boards, and it's wonderful. And the people say, oh, we're going to build all of this. Stanza, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. But you have to be a responsible person and consider the fact that you have other needs. Things have to be spread out. You can't put all your money in one basket. There's no money left to fix the bridges. What are you going to do with the kids 71% of the time? The city says that Broadway Bridge is the only bridge that'll stand up.
I thank you for your testimony, Mr. Dunson. Hold on one moment, please. There may be some questions. Does anybody want to have questions to ask of Mr. Dunson? Any commissioner? Any planning commissioner?
No.
Please ask it.
Is your main concern the expense of this to the taxpayers? I'm unclear why you're so concerned about trying to reuse an existing facility that's pretty well shown to be in the inundation zone. It won't be there after this is all over.
Absolutely correct. It will not be there.
And I agree, most people should be able to cover that ground and get to safety, but I realize there's probably at least 10% that never could do that, no matter what. And there's probably 50% of people who are really out of shape and should be able to make it, but they won't either.
These are high school kids.
Moving really important facilities out of the inundation zone is a big deal to me. And if it's only money that you're bringing up, it's not convincing to me.
Well,
it'd have to be with another set of zeros after that comma. When you start going into the billions, I'd have a complaint. But this cost, it's high, I realize. But I'm trying to understand if that's your only concern, the actual amount of money being spent.
Well, one could say something about the traffic if one wanted to.
Okay.
By moving the high school down there, you eliminate all the traffic problems. That seemed to be a concern of yours before. Okay? I've personally been on school boards that have taken junior highs and made high schools out of them by putting in the labs that go with it. All the playgrounds are already there. They're already sitting there for the high school. It's a great location for a high school, I believe. Okay, I'm sure I'm not as into the idea of how the rooms are designed for maximum and so forth. It's a big school. It's a big school. I don't remember what it is. It's 80-some thousand square feet, I believe it is, or 65 or something like that. It's a big school. And the criteria for keeping everyone safe, including the kids, is that they'd be able to get to a safe place within 15 minutes. And there's no better people that are able to get to 615 than the kids. I don't think that this is a problem. We got other huge problems about the 71% of their time. Don't they care about them when they leave school? I care about them. Who's going to fund all these bridges? Where's that money going to come from? We can't put it all in one sock. You have limited resources. You have to use your resources wisely. You might think that saving one child is worth more than saving 1,000 adults or saving 500 children when they're not there at school. But my trade-off as being a responsible, budget-oriented person would be to say, hey, isn't there a cheaper way we could do it so we could move the money over and fix the bridges? I don't care about saving money. I want to spend it in the places where it's going to do the most good. That's all.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Dunson. Are there any other people who want to speak against the application? Does anybody have a neutral testimony to put forward? Does the applicant wish to provide rebuttal?
Kelly Hosseini. I am an attorney with Miller Nash Graham and Dunn, and I represent the school district on this application, and I'll be brief. I just wanted to first say that Mr. Dunzer misunderstands how Goal 14 works. We've outlined in our application how it works and how we've complied with it. The interesting thing is that I don't think the district disagrees with Mr. Dunzer's premise that there are other things that can be done to keep our communities safe besides moving the kids out of the tsunami inundation zone and moving those schools up on the hill. There are bridges that I'm sure need to be retrofitted. There are probably many other things that public money can be spent on. What I would say, though, is that one does not preclude the other. And in this particular case, 67% of the voters said we want money to go to this particular endeavor. It's really important to us. So 67% of the voters disagree with Mr. Dunzer that keeping kids safe by moving them up out of the tsunami zone is actually a really good use of these funds. And this doesn't preclude bridges being repaired or any other things happening. And we can't take part of the money that the voters approved for moving the schools and ask Mr. Dunzer what he would like to do with it, and then give that money to Mr. Dunzer for his priorities. The taxpayers want this money to be used to keep the students safe. I think it's really irresponsible for him to be very cavalier about what hundreds of kids, teachers, administrators who would be in that Broadway Middle School structure, to be very cavalier about how, well, most of them are probably going to make it. Well, that's not good enough. And the voters said that's not good enough. We're not interested in hoping most of the kids make it. And what he fails to appreciate is the fact that there will likely be injuries during the earthquake. So even under the best of circumstances, you're going to lose some people because they're not going to be able to make it up. And then there's going to be plenty of people who are going to be trying to help the people who have been injured or who otherwise can't make it up the hill. And those people will all drown in a tsunami. And according to Mr. Dunzer, well, that's okay because we've got bridges we need to repair. And again, most of the people will make it probably just fine. I think that's unacceptable. The voters think that is unacceptable. And it's up to the school district to use the money that the voters entrusted to the school district to do what the voters have asked the school district to do.
Any commissioner have questions? No. Does any planning commissioner have questions? My only comment is I concur with your interpretation of Goal 14. I think it's pretty plain, comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Allows for critical services to be outside of the tsunami zone.
You would make a fine lawyer.
Maybe. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. Staff response to testimony. Does any staff need to respond to anything raised in the testimony?
Yes, but really briefly.
Okay.
And I have a friend. So just to reiterate, Goal 14, as was just mentioned, you know, it's clear what it means, but just a reminder, DLCD is the one, they're the state agency that created those goals and enforces those goals and tells us whether we're meeting those goals, and they are supportive of this project. So just to remind you.
And they are the ones that oversee the comprehensive
Yes,
plan
they
of
do.
the incorporated areas that
They do.
this appears.
And now we have.
Thank you. Heather asked me to come and address the...
Name and address, please.
Oh, me too. Tiffany Brown, 3375.
We all know you, but...
No,
Fort
you just
Perkins.
say who you are. You just- yeah.
Oh, I get to just say who I am?
Yeah.
Okay. Tiffany Brown. I apologize. Heather asked me to come address evacuation, which is the one thing here tonight that I am able to address. And so I guess in response and to address Mr. Dunzer's remarks about evacuation, I have a couple things to offer. One is a point that the attorney made, that a 10 to 15-minute evacuation is possible from Broadway Middle School in the best of circumstances when you're doing a drill on National Shakeout Day. But an actual earthquake brings on other things that will impact that. I went to Japan in April, and I visited 2 tsunami-stricken communities. And I want to share something that I learned there. In the 18,000 people that were killed on March 11th, 2011, 75 of them were children, and that only comprised 2 different schools. So most of them were from one school, and 1 child died in a teacher's care at another school. The 2 points I want to make are that those schools were a key resource in those communities for community evacuation. Those gymnasiums held residents, those school fields had temporary shelters, and they actually became a solution for those communities. The other thing that I want to mention is that there were a number of school-related deaths. During the 3/11 event, they were parents coming to pick up their kids in the inundation zone. So we are telling, as emergency management, we're telling parents at our outreach events, do not go get your children. Your schools have a plan in place. They are working to keep your children safe. Get yourself safe and worry about reconnecting with your children at another time. Most of the deaths, all of the deaths in Japan around that were parents going to pick up their kids, and in many cases their children died as well if they managed to retrieve them before the wave hit. And those were the 3 things that came to mind as I was listening to testimony tonight.
Thank you. Does any commissioner have questions? Does any planning commissioner have questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion by the planning commission? If not, I'll entertain a motion to recommendation that the Board of Commissioners approve Ordinance 17-05 based on the staff report and the testimony submitted this evening.
I move to recommend as stated.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend that the Board of Commissioners approve Ordinance 17-05 based on the staff reports and the testimony submitted. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I call the roll, please.
Commissioner Farrar?
Aye.
Commissioner Romero?
Aye.
Commissioner Presley?
Yes.
Commissioner Patrick?
Yes.
Commissioner Manga?
Yes.
Chair Francis?
Yes.
Commissioner Risley is excused.
Thank you. So that concludes that. Congratulations. Thank you for your excellent presentation.
Wait, let's finish this. Give me one more just to do the final piece. Okay, thank you, Chair Francis. May I have the gavel, please? Thank you. And now the Board of Commissioners will deliberate. Is there any deliberation by or discussion by the board?
I am in full support.
Seeing no any further deliberations or comments by the board? Seeing no further deliberations, the hearing will be continued to November 8th when we will conduct the second reading by title only and make the final decision. Thank you, folks. Did you want to take a 2-minute break? We're going to take a couple minutes break and then we'll reconvene in about, we'll make it 3 minutes.
Pretty much. I'm going to figure out the fastest way to use that ice. Right? Hey, buddy, get out of the way. I mean, because that's why I wrote it. It's hard to be the last paragraph in a joint meeting, so I'm very pleased the way it went. It sure helps that France.
down here. We're going
Okay. You can have your own reports.
I'm freaking out.
Well,
I know.
you can stay here, just nail this.
Yeah.
Drive safely. Right here, I'm ready to go. But
You get home before 10 if you're lucky.
I mean, what's it gonna do?
Don't get any speeding tickets now, Myrna.
A lot of your predecessors. Nice to meet you. Great to have you. Thank you.
No.
I knew it would be a long one.
Yeah, actually, I'm not.
I didn't know it would be this
Joint
long.
one like this.
I thought maybe 8:30
Turned
now.
out to be
I didn't know it would be this long.
Yeah, but that's commission business that they have to take care of, so. Yeah, no, it's been a long meeting. And we still have more to go.
Do you have some things for me to sign after the meeting, Teresa?
We can.
I can. It's under Sarah's desk up there, so I'll put it in after the meeting.
There's dust, Scott.
I didn't count.
We've got to figure out this cooling and heating just is up and down in here. It's ridiculous.
Always.
And I don't know. I guess.
That's from the clerk right there. I mean, she might have the document for you to sign. You might want to do it right now. Yeah, if you can do it. Do you have the documents prepared from Mr. Chair Francis? No, so it looks like you're going to have to.
Anyway, what they decided to do.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and reopen the meeting.
Folks are up now.
So I'm now going to reopen the regular meeting of the Clatsop County Board of Commissioners. We're going to move on to the
Business agenda.
business agenda, and our first item is an intergovernmental agreement with Bonneville Power Administration. May I have the staff report, please? Steve, good evening.
Good evening,
Looking forward to
Commissioners.
hearing about what's going on out there.
So tonight, we're here for the approval of our contract with Bonneville Power Administration. This will allow funding for one more year for our Safe Fisheries Program. We've been doing this contract with Bonneville since 1993, and it funds over half of our project with the fisheries. It's for rearing of 800,000 spring Chinook and 1.4 million coho. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Well, of course, I completely support this, and I would have put it on the consent agenda, but I'd like to hear briefly, how are things going out there? If you could make a short statement, just to let us know. I see you've got the information for the 1.4 million coho and the 800,000 Chinook. Everything seems to be flowing.
Yep, everything's going good. We've had a few reductions in our coho with NOAA Fisheries and the recent fisheries review, and that didn't affect just us. That's the whole Columbia system and Willamette system also. A minimal shift on our end, but not drastic. Overall, we're doing good though. We're still this is just the Bonneville side of the house, but our total fish release right now, we're releasing 2.7 million coho, 1.5 million spring Chinook, and 500,000 select area brights. So 4.8 million fish is what we're releasing a year right now, our project.
Excellent job. I hope I can get a few of those in my freezer.
Yeah.
Does any of the other commissioners have any comments or questions for staff? I'd look for a motion.
Well, we're the salmon nation, so thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Shirley?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the fiscal year 17-18, BPA IGA number 77299 and authorize the county manager to sign.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the fiscal year 17-18 BPA IGA agreement number 77299 and authorize the county manager to sign. Seeing no further deliberations, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Our final item tonight, and then we can all go home to our families, is the Seaside Temps. Commissioner Sullivan has requested that this be removed off the consent calendar. May I have a brief, do I have a staff member here for a staff report?
Yeah, I think Kathy Mattinen, who's the fair manager, is here to give an update. This is a request that came from the Fair Board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I think. Not morning yet. Kathy Mattinen, Clatsop County Fair Manager. We submitted this agenda item initially on the consent agenda to request an additional $35,000 be added to our existing Seaside Temps agreement. It was a little bit confusing initially, even for myself, because now that all the contracts, too loud?
There's feedback coming from all these
Sorry.
microphones. Just go ahead and pull the plug on that, and while hopefully Cam's doing that, you can continue and maybe just speak loud and away from me.
Okay, sorry. So anyway, I lost my train of thought, sorry. We made this request for what we believe we will need for additional funding for the Seaside Temps contract through the end of the year. Last year, we had to ask for 2 amendments, and so I really wanted to avoid that this year. We looked ahead at the rest of the year. We have 1 outside staff member, and this really covers our outside, our maintenance people that we currently use Seaside Temps to provide for us. And we have had several events this year. We basically are having events through the end of the year, weekend after weekend after weekend. There's a few that require extra help, for instance, the Wine and Seafood Fest and Scandinavian Fest to get us through this fiscal year. So basically, my maintenance supervisor and myself sat and figured out what we would need through the end of the fiscal year, and this is what we came up with.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for staff?
Yes, I have just, I didn't get to write all this stuff down first, so.
Pardon me?
Never mind. I have a hard time talking off the top of my head. I'm just wondering, like, this is a change to the contract, but I didn't, in the paper, in the contract itself, it doesn't show what the change is. Is it just that you're asking for more money? I don't understand what the change is.
Yeah, this is the amendment to the contract.
Oh, okay. Maybe that was part of the problem for me.
Yeah. And so the amendment's pretty straightforward. It just changes the not-to-exceed amount from $69,000 to $104,000, which is the $35,000 that the Fair Board requested.
But if I may, I sent you an email and you said that there was a big contract for this is my interpretation, the big contract of Seaside Temps, and that this was an additional for this. Can you help me with that a little bit?
Yeah.
You want me to go for it?
Previously, you approved a contract with Seaside Temps for $69,000 for this budget year. And so
Okay.
that contract's already in place. The Fair Board has decided that they need to use more Seaside Temps than they originally anticipated, so they're asking to have the amount of the contract increased by $35,000 to accommodate their needs.
Okay.
So the $69,000 contract already in place, the $35,000 amendment takes the total not-to-exceed amount up to $104,000.
So when I was reading this, the county contracts with Seaside Temps, and then the different groups within the county, the administrative task, shelter task, and fairground labor, those are just part of what the county contracts
Yeah.
overall.
We basically have a master contract, but
Okay.
it provides temps to several different departments.
Okay, and on the rates there, on Exhibit A, there seems to be different numbers, you know, like it's $12 and the rate is $16.35, $16.90, and $17.50. How does that work?
It depends on, it's like anything else, really. It depends on what it is that you're hiring someone to do. And, you're going to pay more if it's a higher skilled, type of labor that you need. And so there's different labor rates to reflect the complexity of the work.
So the different rates, the county works out with Seaside Temps. This job is, we consider it worth this much, or is that what Seaside Temps?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of negotiation that goes on as you go through the contract during the year. But yeah, generally, certain jobs are going to pay at a certain level. If it's a higher skilled job, harder to find someone, those type of things are probably going to pay more.
Okay. And you're thinking for the fairgrounds that, it sounded to me like when I first read this, it was, because of the events that are at the fairgrounds, you're just not getting enough people?
Let me backtrack a little bit, if you don't mind. I was advised earlier today that I probably should take advantage of this moment to cover a couple of things. We have a new maintenance supervisor on staff, and that in combination, he is a forward thinker, and he has reviewed every inch of our grounds and discovered what we need to get done. There are some emergency needs that we have, tasks that we need to get done, as well as the events that we have scheduled. So everything in combination, we're trying to bring our equipment up to snuff. A lot of our buildings and the equipment in the buildings are old. So that in combination with having events scheduled every weekend, we really have the need for having additional staff consistently. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and from the staff report, it's kind of like you want to get as much done before you have to decide if you need to hire someone full-time. Is that part of that deal, too?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes, but I also think, I mean, temps really are temps, and, the general assignment that we have for a temp averages maybe 60 to 90 days. So, these are people we don't need year-round. We don't need necessarily for 6 months or 8 months or a year. And that's what the temp contract allows you to do, is to get the people when you need them for how long you need them.
Okay. And I guess when we get into budget times, maybe we can talk more about this too, as I learn more, so.
And we'll definitely be reevaluating at budget time.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you staying.
All right, if there's no further questions for the board or comments, I'd look for a motion to approve this contract.
So I move to approve the contract amendment for the 2017-18 fiscal year with Seaside Temps for temporary employment services for the fairgrounds.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve the contract amendment for the 2017-18 fiscal year with Seaside Temps for temporary employment services for the fairgrounds. Seeing no further deliberations, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move on to commissioners' reports. I'm going to go first tonight. First, I'd like to hand out this is from the executive director of NOAA. We didn't have any items on the agenda tonight that needed to be voted. And so to save time and to not have to have folks come into town, I have, could you hand one of these to the county manager also? This is an update about what's going on. When you get some chance to go through this, we will be having a NOAA meeting next Thursday, I think the 2nd or 3rd. If you have any concerns about any of the items here, please give me a call and we can chat about them. We're fairly close to bringing the merger. Like I said, you can read in here, Clatsop Shores, we've been recollateralizing, and once the collateral is released, we're going to be moving forward here real fast. So when you get some free time, take a look at this and let me know. Okay, the second item I have is, I got a letter here from a citizen to whom it may concern, and this gentleman, Mr. Owen from Warrington, we don't get a lot of these, and he sent a note that said that he met with the crews and installers and the permit people from DEQ, and that Mike McNichol is probably one of the best, we've had the most outstanding inspectors in his history of Clatsop County. And I just wanted to read that into the record, that they have high regard for Mr. McNichol and his crew because they work together until a difficult install is completed. It's nice to get these letters every once in a while.
Yeah, and I'm going to apologize because we get a few more of those than you guys see. I don't always get those all to you, but a lot of those, I'm going to say a lot, but a number of those come to me during the year about a number of people on our staff, and I always appreciate the positive feedback.
Great, thank you. That's all I have. Commissioner Thompson.
Good news first, Cannon Beach Library turned 90. Let's hear it for volunteer-supported libraries in Clatsop County. There was a cake and a great event. I saw an article in the Daily Astorian about that we're developing policies about the use of our cable TV. I'd really like to have us as board members involved in policy setting. Jim Avery, I think he had approached the chair with this. He developed proposals for public input. And I'd really like to see us as commissioners convene and get public input, particularly on this matter of how to use this asset of public communication with the cable TV. I went to something that was the most challenging training I've ever been to as a member of the Medical Reserve Corps of Cannon Beach. It was mass burn care. I mean, when I talked with people who used to live in Santa Rosa, and I've been talking with the forestry people about we're in danger of wildland fires, so I thought I should do it. I want you to know that I'm going to be the one bringing the little containers of Linger's, whatever it is, fluid to hydrate people, because the rest of it is just overwhelming for me. But I have a video if anybody wants to see a 15-minute video. I participate in the Community Action Team Board as a community volunteer. I raised the issue of Head Start and Dan Gaffney and all of that with the CAT board, and they said they communicate with him a lot. I have lots of measures about the effectiveness of preschool education. They were very supportive of the idea that we're getting data in this feasibility study, and they weren't concerned about the defunding or cost shifting aspects of it that I've heard some of my colleagues voice. We got this big packet about, I don't know what to do with this packet about the dam in Warrenton, but you know, we're at the top of the list, so I wondered.
A long list.
A long list. It came in the packet, but it wasn't part of the online packet, so I wasn't sure how to respond to it. So I'm just looking for clarity on that. I mean, do you have an idea what we're going to do with this?
Well, this isn't really in our area. This was just simply sent to us as, I think, information that this individual
Okay.
has concerns about. This is for the watershed district, ongoing litigation with the city of Warrenton. I think that's for information only at this time, so
Okay.
you're well aware of what's going on out there.
Okay.
Or what this person's opinion is of what's going on out there.
Yeah, the opinion is
There's a number of people that you can contact me, and I can put you in touch if you need some clarification about any questions you have.
Yeah, and on a distinct but somewhat possibly related, because it's about water, Commissioner Magruder in Columbia County is convening a group in Columbia County on December 15th, so I'm going to participate in that meeting at her invitation as a Clatsop County Commissioner, just to get information and bring it back, because it's about water control, and it seems to me that's something that we want to be involved with. On a final happy note, the Pyatt's and I walked from their home in Arch Cape to the sounds of the mooing cow on the sirens in Arch Cape, and got to St. Peter the Fisherman Assembly area during the Great Oregon Shakeout. So, with packs on. So that's it for me.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you. First of all, I went to the FTLAC meeting on October 20th, and one of the topics of conversation was the Habitat Conservation Plan, which is the state has sent a grant request in March. It's working its way through the system, but I believe there's been some changes, and it now has to go directly to the to Washington DC, Department of Interior or something, I'm not sure. So it's delaying what will happen with that. The Board of Forestry will have a meeting on November 1st, and if I can get away from my other job, I will attend that. I think that's important. Okay, so then I also, in the paper today, in the front page, they're talking about the fire department folks, the strike team that went down to California to help. And what I would like to do is, I would like for the board, for the Clatsop County Board here, in the near future, to possibly get together some kind of recognition for these folks that went down there for their courage, their commitment, their skills, and their service. It was quite horrendous, and I'm very proud that we have these folks that were able to do that. So I would like to have that happen if everyone else agrees with that.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Absolutely. I think the consensus we could have, could you put together some sort of recognition and we could...
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of fire departments from the county that
Right.
sent
Yeah.
personnel to a
Right.
variety of
Put
places.
together something overreaching, that'd be great.
And then the final thing is, and I'm sorry I don't have the piece of paper, but with the email was sent, it's concerning a letter supporting, to Senator Wyden, supporting diabetes research. And if you folks are, I mean, I could obviously send it in myself, but I just think it might have a little bit more punch if we send it from the board and put it on, letterhead. And would you feel comfortable with that?
Yes, by consensus, we've sent a letter.
I don't have a problem.
Of course. At the request of the lobbyist, Mick Harris. I support his work. I would be more than happy to sign up that. So by consensus, we would like to draft a letter.
Yeah, I assume everybody got the letter. I did send it
Right.
out
Right.
a couple of days ago.
I'm great with that and authorize the chair to sign.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
And one more thing, the Iron Chef fundraiser is coming up, so keep an eye out for that. It's for United Way. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Nebeker.
Yes, so I attended the Arts Council meeting. They were reviewing the presentation that they're going to give about the economic study. They're going to present here, and they're going to present to various groups throughout the county so that people will be informed about the economic benefit. I met with Suzanne Bonamici on the opioid epidemic in Seaside. I met in Seaside about the opioid epidemic. I can't say I brought away anything very positive. It was more or less people from the hospitals and other people, someone who is new, that has one of the treatment facilities here, and just talking about the issues, and it's very complex. One of the things that Congresswoman Bonamici said that there was some sort of a problem. They did a voice vote some time ago, I guess a couple of years, where it made it harder for the DEA to crack down on large quantities of opioids. I guess that's been reversed, but I didn't even know about it. So, one of the big problems that I think we face is the divide and the barriers between the private and public sector when it comes time to process people through the system so they can get help. I don't know how to remove those barriers, but for instance, this person who is head of this particular private center, she has room, but she couldn't take anyone from the public sector. So there is I don't know how we can do that, but it seems like perhaps there's a way. I'm not sure. And while the prescription opioids have been reduced, doctors are becoming more informed about not overprescribing. People are still in pain, and so they go to heroin. Well, they don't know that they're exactly going to heroin, but while one has been reduced, the other is increased. So, in fact, dramatically increased. Warrenton School is implementing through a grant to have a counselor on campus, meeting weekly with at-risk students. It's astounding to me, when I went through public schools, there were counselors there. We've lost counselors in our public schools. They're needed. Then I went, as some of the other commissioners did, I went to the Cannon Beach elected officials meeting with Congresswoman Bonanici. And then the town hall meeting, and I was really encouraged by the very intelligent, thoughtful questions that were asked, brought up at that meeting. Something that was brought up earlier that I'd like to comment on, I am in support, if it's possible, I don't know what the barriers are, for a voter's pamphlet. This has been requested many times over several different meetings through the years, and I'd like us to just explore that. Also, the forest spraying, I don't know what the county can do, but if there is anything, I really would like us to address that.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The forest spraying.
Forest
Spraying?
Forest, the spraying of
Oh,
herbicides.
okay, I'm hearing spring. Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
It's not your old.
I could just say that I'm kind of working on something with that, and I'll kind of bring up some of my ideas about what to do with that. I might have mentioned it to some of you individually.
Okay.
But I think this is a concern that a lot of the citizens have, and something we need to get in front of.
Okay.
And I would be supportive of the voters pamphlet also.
Okay. And another thing, I seem to remember that when we got our packets prior, when it talked about the fiscal impact, it seemed that we got a little bit more information about whether it was a pass-through or if it was over budget. And I know sometimes we still get that, but if that could be expanded a bit to give a little bit more information about what the fiscal impact is exactly to the county, I would appreciate that.
And may I also say that the ink, I couldn't, it was so light on my copy, I couldn't tell which thing was what, so, but anyways, I'll talk to you. Yeah, the photocopying problem.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll show you, I'm sorry.
And I had a page missing from my financial report, but, you know, stuff like that just happens.
And,
Sorry, Sarah.
no, that's fine. And the last thing, this is not pleasant, but, well, the first part is. Clatsop County, we are very fortunate. We have a highly qualified, experienced professional county manager, and we have competent, well-qualified staff that serve our county with efficiency and quality. Now, the county does not want to spend money needlessly. And as a county commissioner, I certainly do not want to waste taxpayer money ever, not ever. Wasting staff time is wasting taxpayer dollars. And I am deeply concerned about what has been brought before the commissioners regarding Commissioner Thompson's behavior that appears to be unwanted, unproductive, unprofessional in approaching county staff. Putting her hands on staff, insisting that they do what she wants them to do, putting them in the most difficult positions is unacceptable to me. And it is a distraction for staff when they are striving to get their work accomplished in a timely manner. We have a forum. We can discuss things openly as a commission, and we can look for consensus. If the consensus does not come about, then we have to let things go. We also have an avenue going through the county manager. He is the one who interfaces with staff in all cases. And Sometimes in discussions with the county manager, I learn that what I think I want is maybe not the best way, and maybe it isn't even good. So we have an avenue. Also, placing blame on the county manager as justification for Commissioner Thompson's behavior is unacceptable to me. I assume Commissioner Thompson believes her actions are warranted, but after all this time, I have yet to see or hear what positive outcomes have been accomplished through this continued antagonistic behavior towards staff and unprofessional. And I cannot support this behavior that continues to be extremely difficult, and it wastes their time, our time, and therefore county tax dollars. In addition, the public, the people we represent, expect us to conduct ourselves in a professional manner and with decorum when we are acting in our capacity as commissioners at our meetings and assignments. It is my hope we can move forward from what has been brought to our attention and work respectfully with our county manager and staff for the benefit of our county. Thank you.
Commissioner Clement.
I have 4 things. The first, I think this is coming about because I'm going to echo a few things that Sarah mentioned. First, regarding recent events associated with the board member investigation, I have been observing, reading multiple correspondence and taking in information on the dynamics of all of this, and I just have a few comments. As I sense from what I'm hearing and reading that there's just a view out there that we're just not addressing this as a board, and I think it's time. With the nature of home rule, each one of us comes from different backgrounds. We have different experiences and our own knowledge in different areas. We are not experts in running a county on a daily basis. We are not accountants, assessors, planners, or experts in roads or IT. It is concerning to me that the manager and some staff have had to spend so much time dealing with board members' behavior and the drama that tends to surround that. With the amount of work needed to be completed on a daily basis to run the county, we need to make sure we are giving these individuals and departments all the support that they need to focus on their jobs and the tasks at hand. We hire a county manager to make sure the county is ran well on a daily basis. We expect him to hire the best people for the job, experts in their field. It concerns me when the line between the commissioner's role and county employees is crossed. Knowing my place and the ethical rules associated with my position was one of the first things I was taught and told. It concerns me that things have become so awry that our manager is placed in a position to inform us that he needs to protect his staff from contact with the board. This is something the manager and staff should not have to worry about. However, we do not police one another, nor do we have any option for consequences when we do not behave ethically. Perhaps a clear policy on commissioner contact with staff would be welcome so that we are all aware of the line that we should not cross. My second thing is regarding the Columbia River fisheries, which is exciting to me. The first meeting is Monday morning, so I'm looking forward to ironing out the details. And my biggest concern is making sure that this is what it says it is, and that there are no hidden agendas or strings or what that might be. So that's, I'm just coming in to observe and listen and see what's going on. Third, the Great Columbia Crossing was awesome. It was super well attended. I think like 3,500 participants. It was an unbelievable day, and they ran a great race. I really didn't look around because I was just running as fast as I possibly could, but literally. And the medal ceremony after was so wonderful, and people from, I think in my age group, the people that were ahead of me were, the 3 people ahead of me were from San Diego. So
you were 4th in your age district?
Good job.
I was 8th female. But yeah, it was fun. Yeah, it was good. They provided huge amounts. I've never seen so many string cheese packets in my whole entire life. Lots of healthy snacks, and it was just a really I was surprised. I didn't know how it would go, and they did a very good job. Another kind of important thing is this morning I was running on the forest road by the fairgrounds, the turn right before you go to the forest, right before you go to the fairgrounds. And it's a regular route for me. I run there a lot in the morning. And I was running up the ridge, it's a long ridge, and I saw ahead of me something brown, and I see deer and rabbits. I see rabbits every day, 1 to 8, every time I'm there. And I hadn't seen any rabbits yet this morning. And then I saw this brown thing ahead of me, and I thought it was a baby deer. And I just started to speed up because I wanted to see her, and then there's nobody out there, so I tend to say, oh, it's okay, don't worry, I'm just running, so I'm not going to hurt you, things like that. But so I thought, I got a little weird sense, and I realized that's not a deer-like behavior. That's like cat-like. and I was like, what? It's very low to the ground and not deer-like, We were like, and I thought, well, my first instinct is to race to see what it is because it's running away from me. So I sped up a little bit, and I realized it's a cougar.
Wow.
Racing, running super fast. Away from me, so, in the right direction. But it was like a yearling, maybe, not a baby, but not a big male. So, and then I thought, oh, wow.
Where was this?
You turn left, if you're on 202 to the fairgrounds, it's the road before the fairgrounds. You know what that's called, Paul? The forest? Yeah. Yep. Forest trail system. But it was pretty neat. And then I went on a second loop to see if I could maybe see it again. Sort of. I didn't feel threatened, although maybe I should have. But I went on a second loop, and I still didn't see any rabbits, which was sort of weird, And I didn't see it again.
Maybe they were gone.
I know. And then I got back to work this morning, and I looked at the paper, and there was this huge picture, first thing I looked at, of the cougar. So anyway, sometimes when I see those, I'm like, oh, I'm never going to see. Well, they're really there, so I will maybe not go there for a few days. That's it for me.
Great report, thank you. County Manager Moore.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I know it's been a long meeting. I do want to mention, last week we had the first meeting of the Countywide Housing Study Steering Committee. As Commissioner Clement mentioned, we have the first meeting next week of the Fisheries Transition Advisory Committee. And just one other thing I want to mention, I know at the last meeting that we compressed our meeting schedule in November and December. But I really think it's important that we at least have one more work session before the end of the calendar year just on the jail. It's a huge decision, and obviously it could have impacts on this community for many, many years. And I think we need to keep that discussion moving along and hopefully get to a decision point at some point about what we may do. I think having that work session is important because since the last work session, I've talked with the architects, and they've come up with some other options. So we don't just have sort of the $12 million and the $28 million option. There are some options in between there. I just got them today, I think. And I know the sheriff's office has them. They're taking a look at them from an operational standpoint to see how they would work. They all give us the opportunity to significantly increase our jail capacity, but at something less than $28 million. So I want to get those in front of you. I'd like to have some discussion about that. So again, I hate to add another meeting after we just took 2 off the calendar. But I really would suggest we do that. If you're willing to do that, I would maybe ask Teresa to reach out to everybody and see if we can do this either before one of our 2 remaining meetings we have before the rest of the year, or if we need to have a standalone work session, we could certainly consider that as well.
I think we can look around right now and come by consensus and say that let's just schedule that where you feel it fits in best to the agenda. We can talk about that tomorrow or before Friday if you want.
Okay. And then just the last thing for me, we've had some discussion about this at a couple of previous meetings, that probably been 6 weeks ago now, maybe, but, Commissioner Thompson had expressed some concerns publicly that there were some staff concerns, and so I did ask County Council to follow up on that to see if we could find out what those were and what we need to do about them, and so I would just ask County Council to give a brief update.
Brief update, Commissioner Thompson wished our communication to be with her council, and I do not have any further information at this point.
Okay.
Does that conclude your report, County
Yes.
Manager? The meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.